Okay, welcome everyone to the Analytic Mind podcast. Today I've got Paul Lucassen with us, and Paul is coming in from calling in from the Netherlands. Is that right, Paul?
Yes, that's right.
That's great. That's great. Now, why don't we just kickstart things off? Maybe just give a bit of background, do a bit of an introduction, bit of a background in terms of what you do, and then I know there's plenty of great stuff we can dive into post that.
Okay, fine. Shall I go ahead?
Yeah, go for it.
Right. Okay. So my name is Paul Lucassen. I work as an independent logistics consultant in the Netherlands. Actually, I work in Europe and also the US, but predominantly for customers in the Netherlands. My background is transportation and logistics, as you can tell. So I've been working for many companies associated with transportation, logistics, ranging from frozen chicken in 300 tons a lot to Libya, to small parcels, to spare parts for service engineers on aircrafts. So a wide range of modalities. And I came to a point where I did no longer want to be a managing director for a company, and I wanted to be much more closer to the real data and the real thing. So I decided to sort of demote myself and start working much more on consultative selling and creating data content for the customers that I was talking to. And I did that for a while. I was invited by a company to work in France for a year and a half, which I did. And after that, I decided that I wanted to set up my own business, and I started off as an independent consultant. And ever since, it has been busy. My customers come from my own network, so it's a mouth-to-mouth situation where you do something and someone else says, can you do it for us as well? And subsequently, I'm always busy, and I'm in a luxurious position because I don't really have to go out and find work, because I guess there must be a million consultants, so you need to have a proper network. I suppose that the secret, if you like, is not a secret, but the backbone of my business is basically my knowledge, relevant knowledge, life about transportation in general, and the fact that I can actually convert the data associated with logistics into Power BI dashboard. And that is something which is also rewarding to me. It's nice to do, it's fun, and I like to do things that I enjoy, because then I can just dive in even deeper than I would normally do. And that's the way I deal with my work and with my customers. And as I just told you, disclosing the unexpected is something that came up to me in terms of people giving you their data. I mean, it's easy as you sign a non-disclosure agreement, they give you data and they say, well, this is what we expect. And then it's up to you to sort of try and raise above that and actually surprise the companies with insights in their data, in their business that they were not aware of and that they can now follow on a day-to-day basis. So that's what I do.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you've had a pretty long career and done a whole variety of things, mainly in the transportation and logistics area, which is going to be fascinating to dive into, I think, because it's quite unique. So how did you sort of discover, because Power BI is what you're sort of mainly using as a tool set to deliver this work. How did you get into Power BI, or how did you figure out that Power BI was this transformational tool that you could embed into some of your customers?
Well, I guess like most of us, when you start dealing with data and suddenly they become big data, you hit the limits in Excel, which in 2010 was the case. And then I started to use Power Pivot, which was quite unpopular at the time. And not many people were actually migrating to it. So to me, it was something like, if I have a really big data set, I will subsequently use Power Pivot. So I started to do a little bit of DAX already then. After a couple of years, I found that not many people still were actually looking at it. And then I decided to turn to Tableau and ClickView for a while. And then suddenly Microsoft decided that they wanted to actually make it sort of explode. So I went back to Power BI again and never stopped. And I've never touched ClickView or Tableau like that before.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because you could really say that Microsoft dropped the ball for a number of years, couldn't you? And then finally realized the error of their ways and reconfigured Power BI to be in its sort of current form. And that's actually when I personally sort of started seeing the benefit as well, when they sort of released it in this 2.0 version, post Power Pivot and what else? What are that? Power View and all of these crazy tools that they created, which were just horrific. So that's okay. That's great. That's great. And
next, sorry, yeah, go on.
No, you go, Paul.
Yeah, well, next to that, I'm also working with GIS software, Geographic Information System software. So next to my analysis with numbers, I also do a lot with mapping. And my combination of using GIS tools and data is amazing because you can disclose so much information by using maps. And then, of course, initially, maps in Power BI were sort of non-existent. But today, you've got a lot of tools. Actually, with a bit of hard work, you can make them work for you. So that is what I do today, trying to achieve what I do in GIS software in Power BI, because the difference between a GIS software is that you have a static picture after all you do and you're processing. And obviously in Power BI, you've got a dynamic map. So the combination of those two is actually a success factor.
Right. Well, let's dive into that. What are some of the as you mentioned, the sort of geospatial analysis that you can do in Power BI specifically has come a long way in the last few years, especially with some of the custom visuals, etc. you can use. So what are some of the, why don't we just work through some examples of like what sort of geospatial analysis you can do in transportation and logistics, just so everyone can get a clearer picture on some of the work that you've done historically.
Yeah. Well, for example, you start off with showing people where are their customers, which is simple. Then you start with telling them where are your transportation costs. And sometimes you'll find that you have high transportation costs in areas where you do not expect it. So you can actually dive in to find out why is this. And I've got examples where people were actually looking at their transportation costs in general. And suddenly they looked at France and they found that the highest transportation costs were right in the center of France, which is a no-go area. And it turned out that someone was selling there on a specific KPI being next day, and subsequently they were incurring high costs for transportation to an area which was not at all necessary. So we could then reduce the costs. And subsequently it was so easy with a couple of maps to identify that sort of thing. The next thing I do is I do infrastructural work where people ask me to look at their supply chain and their network. And then what I do is I just plot their factories. At this moment in time, I'm working on a project for a European company with 13 warehouses in Europe. And the intention is to close a number of them down, given the current circumstances and given the fact that they were set up at some point in time. And we're looking at trying to reduce the numbers, so increase the efficiency and reduce the stock. And this is where we use Power BI to actually run scenarios in terms of if we look at this situation in a certain country and we would reduce the number of warehouses, what would the impact be on costs, transit times, delivery? So those are a few examples of what you can do.
That's great. That's great. Now, one thing that sort of sticks out to me when I hear you talk through that is obviously Power BI can analyze that sort of data incredibly well, but is part of the challenge here actually getting the data of all of those all of those transactions, all of those basically data points. Is that half the battle, do you find?
That is the start of the battle.
Yeah,
you are so right. Thing is that everyone you speak to in businesses claims that their data is up to speed. Our data is 100%, and then you get the data and it's horrible. So the first thing you do is you take, sometimes it takes me 2 days to clean a data set. And you've got millions of records and you have to run through them to make sure that everything is in the right place. Obviously Power Query is a great help there. Then you need to geocode it. And geocoding is an important part to make sure that you can actually get your map right. Then you start to do your first analysis in numbers first. And what I like to do is just run analysis in tables and cards. And after that, I start to visualize it. So I'm not wasting time in the beginning with all sorts of colors and themes and maps, but I start by looking at the data, trying to get to grips with it. And once I do, I start to actually plot the data and subsequently show people what they are doing. And then you need a few dashboards, and you can actually explain the whole business to them. And I also do what I call logistics due diligence work, where the bigger accountancy companies sometimes hire me when they are looking at a merger. And they have, last year I had a customer for with $100 million turnover, and their transportation costs were $16 million, and their yearly profit was $3 million. So they asked me to work out whether the $16 million transportation cost, actually that was what I offered because that's part of my services, whether $16 million was too high or too low. And I found out after a bit of work that they could save $2 million on their transportation, meaning that their profit of $3 million was actually increased by $2 million if they would follow the advice. So that goes to show how much you can do by simply cracking numbers.
Yeah, well, that's an awesome example. Now, how, if we can, you probably don't have to go into specifics or anything, but how did you showcase that, or how did you identify that that huge, well, it's on a percentage basis, it's not a huge change of the total transportation cost, but it's a big change in the profitability, obviously.
Exactly. Well, it's basically all around benchmarking. So what you do is you look at the data, you look at the opportunities in terms of, can we consolidate? Do we really need to ship every day? And the next step is that you look at the prices. So you tender with other transportation companies, and then you add the numbers to the original file. So what you do is you price every record, and then you start pricing every record with the prices of other carriers. And subsequently, the end result is clear.
That's really interesting. So, and that is, I think, a really powerful example of how if you think a little bit creatively around what you could do with a tool like Power BI, by bringing in multiple different data sources, because you've got, and I presume that the company initially never did this sort of analysis, but a different pair of eyes, like your eyes, sort of coming in and saying, hey, here's your raw data, but let's bring in some comparison data, and then by doing that, you can recognize the arbitrage difference, really.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not that hard. It's purely a matter of a bit of hard work. And indeed, I always call it my helicopter view. People on the desk are basically working with the numbers every day. And when you come in as a consultant, it's only a temporary role. So what you need to do is be able to look from a distance and subsequently dive in and use the numbers in your knowledge and expertise to get a result. And another example is my infamous Brexit scenario dashboard. I built a dashboard. Obviously, in Europe, it's a big thing with the UK and Brexit. I'm sure you've heard about it. And the consequences on transportation costs, both for shippers and for transportation companies, is huge. Given the fact that if you look at capacity, there's a huge amount of trailers and trucks and combinations traveling to the UK on a daily basis. There's really thousands per day. And if you imagine that a round trip, say, from Rotterdam to London and London back to the Netherlands could probably take 3 to 4 days. And given delays with customs, that may actually rise to, say, 5 or 6 days. If you, on top of that, see that there will be an impact on the transportation cost in general, probably the rate of exchange, I created a scenario dashboard, actually sort of based on one of the examples in the course, where we were doing a lot of things with slices and scenarios. And I subsequently created a dashboard that will allow my customers to, if they like, per customer, see what the impact is if sea freight goes up, rate of exchange goes up or down, the number of days for things to be in transit increases, and subsequently they can see the end result. And on top of that, they also have a real tool to convince their customers that it's justified to look at the rate negotiations given the changed circumstances. And that is really nice to do.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying hearing about these use cases for Power BI, because it's just so real world, isn't it? Like you're making from what you can put together in a reporting solution can actually make a significant difference to what is actually the decisions that are going on inside of a business. And that to me has always been the transformational the transformational part of what Power BI can achieve. So it's great to see how you've been demonstrating that within these scenarios and within these businesses, and making a significant impact by the sounds of it.
Yeah, well, it's a privilege to be able to work like this, because obviously when you work for a company on a day-to-day basis, you've got a completely different view on things than me working as a consultant, because I may do 20, 25 projects per year. Because it doesn't really take too long to create a dashboard and create insights, particularly because I also give a bit of side training to make sure that people can carry on with my dashboard if I'm not available, or if I'm not around. And I've obviously been doing it for a long time. I'm probably the oldest member in the Enterprise DNA membership.
Possibly, which is which certainly is I mean, that's a good thing. It's something to be. You're the patriarch. You're the patriarch of the Enterprise DNA membership.
Probably.
I also think it's quite unique how you have you've obviously got your niche expertise, and you've layered on top of that your Power BI expertise, and it just brings another element to what you can actually provide as a service, and the value that you can provide for your customers and for businesses. And I think that's a good takeaway, is that you don't need to just be this broad Power BI developer. You could actually take some of your historic expertise in anything. It could be transportation, it could be marketing, it could be HR, it could be anything to do with business. Overlay that technical Power BI understanding and expertise, and there is a lot you can add, a lot of value you can bring to clients and to organizations.
Yeah, true. Yeah, it's always a combination of the two. Did you notice a short breakup? My VPN reconnected, so I don't know whether you heard it, but okay.
No, I think it's fine. I think it's all good. It's all good. Now, going back to geospatial for a moment, what are some of the additional tools and and potentially features within Power BI that you're using outside of the out-of-the-box things that come with Power BI?
Well, I've actually started to create shapefiles for a while already, but I've taken it to the next level, really, associated with the intention to build some content for Enterprise DNA. And what I'm trying to do is, for instance, get around the issue that you cannot put more layers on a map, with the exception of Esri map, where you can do a little bit of that. So what I'm working on at the moment, and I achieved an option to create multiple layers on a map. So you can actually interact with 2 layers, say a depot and delivery points, and you have 10 depots. I want to show 10 depots, and I want to show all the delivery points. But I also want to show what the distance is between them, and I want to show in which direction they are from each other. And it's that sort of thing that I've created, and it's that sort of thing that I want to share in the content.
Oh, that's great. Okay, so this is some custom development that you've actually decided to do on top of Power BI.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to more support in the forum, actually, from people also interested in this. So we can probably create a group of people who are developing more to this extent. Same goes about geocoding, for instance. I'm looking at geocoding options to make sure that we have a correct way of getting people to use geocoding instead of everyone running in circles to websites, finding options to do it, or do it in Power BI and Power Query. I will demonstrate actually in content how to do it in Power BI, Power Query, with a Bing API and a Google API, but it's slow. So there are better ways, and this is what I intend to demonstrate as well. So there is lots of things going on in mapping, and I'm looking forward to display that.
That's great. That's great. For those listeners who aren't aware, because maybe not everyone who's listening knows all about enterprise DNA. Paul is one of our enterprise DNA experts and is coming on board to create in the very near future some additional content within our education portal. So, a lot of these things that we're discussing today we will be showcasing them in a more visual format within our course modules in the near future, which is really exciting. Really exciting. I think there's just this is an untapped area that is really not covered in any extensive way out there, and I think that partnering with yourself, Paul, we could really make it enterprise DNA a big information source for this type of material.
Yeah, absolutely.
What are some other interesting insights that you have been able to generate within businesses, bringing your with Power BI and with your expertise? Maybe if we could, let's think about some other examples example reports that you've worked on, some interesting scenarios that you've worked on, just so we can provide some inspiration around what is actually possible to businesses of the same nature, or just even if you're in a business that hasn't even ventured into this type of analysis.
Yeah, a good example probably is in logistics, people with warehouses. I've done this year, I've completed a project, a big one, where a company has over 100,000 square meters of warehouse. And they are in compartments, seven different compartments. And what we needed to do was to actually identify where the products were. So in which department, were they in the right place? So were they moving fast or were they slow? So from the data, we used the order picking and also goods coming in and where they were stored. So we used Synoptic Panel, probably not known to all people, but Synoptic Panel is a custom visual that you can use to actually sort of create a drawing, so to speak. And on the drawing, you can put the compartments. So we numbered the compartments, which was a huge job. But eventually now we can click on any location in a warehouse and we can see what's there, what was the history of it. Is it a fast running location or not? Is it making profit or not? So that it's a true contribution of the efficiency for a logistics company if they have a warehouse. And another example was or is a project I'm doing for an in-night delivery network where we're looking at their locations and the line hauls between the locations and whether they are in the right place and what we can do in terms of efficiency and distance. And there's so much going on in that respect. So I can go on for hours when I talk about my project, Sam.
Yeah, I mean it is really fascinating because the opportunities in the geospatial area are just enormous. They're so significant that they're hard to comprehend. Just the optimizations that you can get from, say, delivery times to delivery costs to optimizing where you place things in a warehouse. I mean, your mind always goes to sort of Amazon when you think about really heavy logistics, right? Because they seem to have the most optimized system out there. But that type of insight can actually be achieved by any business these days. If you can implement a solution like Power BI, you're possibly with your expertise.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've just started because, as you know, in the Netherlands, we are a transit country. So we have a lot of freight coming in. And obviously, e-commerce is booming. And as a consequence, there's a lot of volume that needs to be stored and needs to be retransported and packed. And subsequently, there's an enormous amount of data. Imagine that a delivery company in Germany probably have 2 million records a month, and that's actually not even that big. But if you multiply that and you get 3 years of data, you've got a lot of work to do to make sure that you optimize your dashboards so that you can still work with the vast amount of data that you process. So there is a lot going on, and but also it's not that hard. I wouldn't claim to be a true DAX expert, but it's the combination of my experience in transportation and the way that I can deal with DAX that makes it work.
Right.
That's it.
And so you don't you haven't ventured into any advanced analytical technologies like machine learning or R or anything like that. You're just using straight, you're basically using all the functionality inside of Power BI.
Yes, the reason is that if I start using R and Python, I would first of all start to learn that as well. And frankly, you simply haven't got enough time in a day to actually run through everything that's thrown at you today. But also, the majority of my customers would not have the time nor the resources to invest in this similar knowledge. So what they would actually get is a black box running on an R script. So I prefer to do as much as I can with the standard tools, and subsequently they will be able to continue working with the dashboards instead of being dependent.
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point, as that you just made, in terms of you've got to understand your customer's expertise as well, and you don't want to be placing something in a customer where the ability to use it is going to be so limited because of the knowledge gap. And also, I mean, my takeaway from that is you can already provide enormous value just by using the techniques that are available to you within Power BI. With the formulas and the way you model things, the way you combine data, optimize data. I mean, there's just so many ways to add value just with that.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like everyone else, when I started my first Power BI dashboard, the first thing I did was get as many visuals in, custom visuals, as I possibly could, without even trying the existing default ones. And slowly I actually started taking a few away. And today I probably use 2 or 3 custom visuals, and that's it.
Yep, there's beauty in simplicity, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I've always been a big one around that you mainly using the out of the box ones, because you just know that they've been tested like you just wouldn't believe, by Microsoft. They're not going to fall over. They've got all of the ready-made functionality built in. So I've always been a big one of keeping it pretty simple. But they were always lacking on the mapping side. So I can see why there was a requirement to use some sort of custom visual eventually.
Yeah, so as I say, I use 2 or 3 which are outside the default ones, and they are mapping visuals. So
yeah, right.
And that is what I will demonstrate. But there are a few good ones, but in general, you can do so much with the existing visuals. I think probably same as in Excel. You think you know Excel, but you only use 15-20%. It's the same with Power BI. So you probably use 20-30% of the possibilities that are actually enclosed in the existing visuals. So rather explore that. And like you said, they are reliable, they won't break. And that's obviously important for me as a consultant. I cannot afford to deliver a dashboard with a custom visual to find it's not working.
Yeah, exactly. It's so true, the point you just made. That with Excel, only everyone only uses 10 to 15%. Power BI it's probably the same. You're probably using 20 to 30%. But what that also tells me is how much value there is to unlock for anyone with some sort of entrepreneurial drive. There's so much opportunity to bring in your analytical skills and embed a tool like Power BI into businesses anywhere who just don't have it, who aren't using it. There's and even those who are using it, because that there's a huge amount they're not using, and so there's just enormous, absolutely enormous opportunity if you can really master, and we're not even talking Power BI here. We're just, it could be Tableau, it could be ClickView. If you can really master the analytical capabilities of this new tool set that's come out in the last sort of four to 6 years, there's a lot of value you can generate for your customers, your employers, but also for yourself.
Absolutely. And of course, Microsoft, with adding the artificial intelligence visuals, is really contributing to that, because currently I think we've got 3 now, and they are really a treasure, if you like. But also coming back to my mapping habits, I'm working on a project which we're probably tapping in next year, where we are starting to use well-known text. You know what well-known text is, but it's a way of describing something in geospatial terms, like latitude and longitude, that you connect in a line string or a multi-string. A bit technical, but you can actually put a line on the map, and that line can be connected with an IoT sensor, and subsequently it can tell you something about, for instance, the condition of a dam or a railway. So what we're looking at is using IoT sensors, connect them with the latitude, longitude embedded in well-known text strings, and subsequently map that. And I've got a first example. I've created routes for trucks with well-known text multi-strings. And as a result, I can tap into routes for vehicles and check what was the delivery time, how long were they traveling, what was the fuel consumption. So that's another topic that we've only touched on. And that is a combination of IoT, artificial intelligence. So it never stops, does it?
I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just an emerging field, which is absolutely huge. I mean, enormous. When you and I can sort of see the layering. You know how you talked about the layering approach on maps. When you add sort of the sensors and IoT capabilities, there's going to be these multiple layers, right, that you can optimize in the future. So yeah, I mean, that in itself is a very exciting field. And the other thing that comes to mind with IoTs is the streaming capabilities. So a lot of, there's a lot of sort of infrastructure stuff that you need to manage and connect when you're wanting to live stream data and things like that. So another big opportunity there too.
Yeah, correct.
Do you want to maybe touch on, Paul, how, what I think would be quite useful is, how did you sort of grow your analytical mind, your analytical thinking capabilities? Because obviously you didn't come, well, actually, I'm not 100% sure, but you maybe weren't an analyst all the time. From the you didn't start off as an analyst. You didn't spend a lot of your career as an analyst. So how did you gravitate towards that, or how did you evolve your way of thinking around this more analytical framework?
I suppose it grew. I was working in transportation. I was doing a lot of sales. Doing sales, you get data, and subsequently you start thinking about what can we do with the data. And I carried on with that. I was one of the first to introduce route planning systems. So we would actually start. It's not that long ago that we actually have these systems where you can do trip planning and plan 100 vehicles with thousands of addresses to run the most efficient routes. So subsequently, I went doing more things with data. And then I decided that I'd rather work with the data than managing people, because if you have managed bigger companies, the biggest company I managed had about 250 employees. And your day-to-day business is actually managing people, not doing business. And I prefer to do business. So I decided to scale down and start doing things with data. and subsequently I was a much happier man.
That's that is well, I mean, I come at it from a slightly different angle. I mean, I wasn't when I was in working within a large organization, I wasn't really at the sort of the executive level just yet, but I decided that I wanted to work for myself for really the same reason. But that's just an aside. Interesting though. That's really interesting. And do you feel like your analytical capabilities grew as you sort of learned more of the tools that enabled you to bring a lot of the insights to life?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, when I started with Lotus 123, which was a spreadsheet program. It
Right.
was slow and it couldn't handle a lot. So you evolve with the tools that become available. And then once they are getting more available and becoming more technical, you start diving into it. And it's also basically a matter of being curious, but also a matter of being, I'm bored pretty soon. If I think I know something, I start learning something else, because otherwise there is no challenge, and I need to be challenged in order to do what I like. And that's what I do today. So I always work on something new, and I always try to be ahead of things, so I can actually make myself relevant for my customers.
Great, great. Now, I think we've gone for a good time now, so I think we'll wrap up with you know, the last couple of questions. I wanted to maybe just touch upon your thoughts around the future of Power BI, and because I know that you're an expert in Power BI specifically. I know we've got listeners who use a range of different tools, but where do you think Power BI is going, and what sort of further impact in the future do you feel could be seen, or you know, even just in your own market?
Well, I think that what you see now is that the self-service aspect of the business intelligence that Microsoft is seeking will continue to grow. And I said to a friend a few days ago that we get to a point that you wake up in the morning and call Alexa and say, "Can you start a Power BI?" And then you ask a few questions of a data set, and you get a graph, and you know where you are.
Yeah,
and probably that's the future. But
I believe
things are developing at a pace that's amazing. And subsequently, I think people will adapt to that, because whether they like it or not, they will have to. And they will have to try and comply with the way that you can handle data, and the way that companies like Microsoft will continue to offer products that are demanding of you to keep pace and stay in touch with the developments. So that's a challenge for many companies as well. And the good thing about Power BI, obviously, is that it's not very hard and it's not very costly to enter into Power BI. And they've created an environment that is affordable and is certainly worth the while. So I think that in terms of the future, artificial intelligence, machine learning will play a very important role, as they do today. And probably in the background less than they are today, because many people probably do not even realize what's going on when they run forecasting on a line graph. But it's that sort of thing that they will continue to develop, and eventually the question and answers and stuff like that will become more and more important for presentations. So I stopped doing PowerPoint presentations many years ago. I've got one slide, and that says I'm Paul Lucassen. And then I get onto my GIS software on my Power BI dashboard, and you can tell the story. So it's about storytelling.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I foresee that there's just going to be this growing immersion in data and insights, where I mean, we're just starting to see the beginnings of it. I mean, I see the sort of first version of it as the ability, you know, with Power BI, the online service, you know, being in the cloud. You know, that's really the how it's sort of its first manifestation. But then you're going to move. Now we've moved into being able to bring up insights in Microsoft Teams, for example. So you can be chatting away, and then all of a sudden you could bring up a visual on a certain insight. And then very soon after that, you'd have to think that the voice activation is going to be available. You're going to be able to bring it up in maybe an email that you're writing. I just think this immersion in data insights is going to be so prevalent, and just so more. We're really at the beginnings. It's going to be so much more prevalent, and just having the analytic mind, and that's why exactly why we call this podcast that. I think having an analytic mind, or a mindset is going to be quite it's going to be very important in the future, and also a culture, an analytic culture as well, so that you can be the ones who are benefiting first from this sort of capability.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, you see more companies now actually employing data analysts. So
yeah,
you have people now who are actually looking at data on a day-to-day basis, whereas normally they would be involved in operational jobs, and then on a Friday afternoon they would do a few spreadsheets. So it's improving, and it will improve vastly once these opportunities become more well known than they are today.
Yeah, I think one of the other big things, the other big insights that I've had in recent years, especially, is that if you take all of the analysis that could be done, that could have been done historically, and what can now be done, I would guess, with historic tools that everyone's still using to this day, but are slowly gravitating off, you're probably only analyzing about 10%. You're only optimizing about 10% of what can be done. And what I found with Power BI, and I've seen this for years now, is that as soon as you can do so much more, and you do more, you do analyze more. Very quickly you can analyze 5 times the amount that you analyzed historically, and then you realize, oh, there's still more you can do. And I think that that's going to really make a huge impact when you have this significant optimization over all areas of business, and many different business functions and business lines, and and products. It's quite exciting.
Absolutely. In in my line of business in transportation, the margins are extremely low, which is really funny because there's a high demand, but at the same time, there is so much competition on price that the margins are extremely low. And what I try to demonstrate to customers, and the first time I tell them, they look at me as if I'm mad, is that they try and grow their business. And I always say, you better shrink to profit rather than grow to a loss. And subsequently, I create scenarios where they can actually calculate if doing more means that they are making more money. Most of the time, the answer is no. So shrink to profit and be aware of your business, analyze your business before you think that the next customer will be giving me more volume. But more volume is certainly not more profit. And that's a lesson.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great example of how you can get creative with these tools. All it takes is just getting creative around what you can do analytically with market opportunities, with historic data sets. It's about bringing a lot of these ideas together, embedding them into embedding the right techniques into report, and then unearthing those insights. And that's how, in my eyes, you can really make a significant difference in any organization out there, anything.
Yeah.
Right, Paul, I think we might wrap up. I think there's been a great discussion, and we've gone into some really different things here that we haven't covered on the podcast before. So just really want to thank you for being on, and it's been great to get to know you a little bit better, and I'm sure the listeners really benefited from this chat.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Cool. Okay. Well, let's wrap things up. I'm gonna turn off the recording here, and thanks to everyone for listening in, and make sure to subscribe to hear many more sessions like this. I think we're really creating a movement here around making a big impact analytically within organizations. So want to make sure that you get your hands on this great content and great info as soon as it comes out. Okay, all the best, everyone.